Do you remember the thought that the safest place in the whole world is the inside of your own home? This is incorrect. The walls of my room were decorated with paintings that I had hung up, and the shelves were totally filled with my toys. Among all the things that have ever happened to me, the most terrifying and dangerous thing that anyone has ever done to me personally is something that I discovered in this very room. In addition to that, this crime was perpetrated by an individual who was a resident of the same home that I inhabited. During a chat that I had with my brother in secret, he divulged to me some really unsettling information, which forced me to consider the idea that not even Satan would be capable of committing such atrocious crimes. As soon as he gave me information about these matters, I became obligated to make sure that he continued to have faith in me. How do you think my father will develop in the long term? This is the last question. My father was left with a positive impression of the young man. He had complete and utter confidence in the fact that he was in possession of skills that were so astoundingly powerful that there was nothing that he could not do by putting his mind to it. This is a testament to the fact that his self-confidence is at an extraordinarily high level. I continue to hear that gravelly voice in my thoughts on a daily basis, even after all of this time. It has been 73 years since the day that I was brought into this world, but I still hear that voice. My official name is Miss Jessica, however my legal name is Jessica Randall. Miss Jessica is the name by which I am legally known, so you can call me that. Are you still coming up with yet another excuse, or have you already started to make up another story? I asked her frankly. I was born in the town of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, in the year 1951. Is it feasible that I am just coming up with a way of telling a story? For instance, could it be possible that that stomach that grew up inside of me when I was 14 years old was simply a fabrication of my imagination? I received the following response from you when you asked your question. It was expected that women would exhibit thanks, refrain from speaking, and conduct themselves in a way that was advantageous. At that time, this was considered to be an example of behavior that was average for that particular situation. It was the month of July, and the afternoon was an unparalleled thrill, beyond the power of words to describe. While I was sitting on the porch of my small house, I suddenly became overcome with the desire to divulge a secret that I had been keeping from myself for more than 60 years. The reason that it falls short of expectations is that it is made up of a significant number of different parts and components. Furthermore, it will necessitate a substantial length of time prior to providing you with a satisfactory experience. When you find yourself in a circumstance that is like to one that has been previously described, you are going to experience a significant amount of anxiety and repulsion. As a result of this, the instinctual reaction is to place your hands over your ears. Even although it is something that comes naturally to a lot of people, it is absolutely necessary to make sure that everyone else is aware of the events as they are unfolding. I am fully aware of the reality that a considerable number of women have found themselves in situations that closely resemble those that I have previously encountered. The prevailing sentiment among these ladies is that they are the only females on the face of the earth who are undergoing these experiences. If you could leave a remark letting me know the location from which you are joining us, I would be very grateful. I am extremely enthusiastic about the possibility to do an analysis that will enable me to identify whether or not the story that I tell will resonate with women from various regions of the country. If you are able to, please subscribe to this project and give it a like. If you could get that done, it would be of great assistance. Every comment and like that I get serves to provide me with additional motivation. They give me the courage that I need to continue to deal with problems that the vast majority of people would prefer to ignore. When I was 7 years old, I played outside in the yard. Eventually, all of these concepts became realities at that precise point in time. In the kitchen, I can still clearly remember an altercation that my parents had. It was a memory that had been firmly and irrevocably embedded into the brain, making it a challenging thing to bring back to mind. In this particular set of circumstances, he exhibited the same demeanor that he had displayed in the past when he had found himself in situations similar to this one. He would become infuriated and scream, but this time things turned out differently than they had in the past. This kind of behavior needs to be dealt with promptly, Martha. The young lady in question is the victim of the prejudiced assumptions that you are making, which are substantial and unjust. This is quite advantageous. She recognizes the fact that I hold the position of power in this particular situation. His hair was dark, and for his age, he was already very tall. There is a color that is commonly found in emeralds. It is the same color as his eyes, which are a shade known as emerald green. This made the hue of his eyes more visible than the eye colors of the rest of our family. You should not be surprised to learn that my brother Tony is 5 years older than I am. He is my brother after all. The arrival of this person would bring about a considerable quantity of anguish for a substantial number of individuals, according to the prevailing belief held by the people who lived in the area. The memory of the look on my mother's face that I remember seeing is still enough to give me shivers. She was quiet and had a sense of fear for no cause, much as I did when I was a child. The very first thing he would do is reduce my heart to 1,000,000 shattered pieces. This was something that none of them had a premonition would occur. At that very moment, the events that would eventually unfold in the future were already taking place. These occurrences would eventually determine the direction that her life would take in the years that lie ahead. It is of the utmost significance to highlight the fact that no woman should ever be exposed to the types of abhorrent atrocities that she was subjected to, no matter what the circumstances are. For an inconceivably long amount of time, my brother Tony has been behaving in a disruptive manner, which has turned my home into a living nightmare. He is also the individual whom my father had greater respect for than any other individual who has ever walked the earth. I need to learn how to cope with this source of stress on a regular basis. Would you be able to provide me with any information about the ultimate future that is in store for my father? This is the last question. It was never his fortune to be granted a second to catch sight of anything, however insignificant. He did not notice it at all. The perfect son is someone who is exactly like Tony in every way, according to the perspective of Tony's father. He was very much bothered by the fact that his father had never been able to come to terms with the reality that his child was superior to him in every conceivable aspect. Out of all the potential sons that he may have had, he was the one that he had always hoped and desired to have. His father was a man who frequently drank alcohol, swore, and played baseball. Drinking was only one of the many activities that he enjoyed. He was in possession of all of those goods. I was let down by every conversation that I had with other people. The truth of the situation is that I was a teenager who did not have the ability to grab the attention of other individuals. There has never been a single moment in my life when I have had the impression that romance will come into my life. The individual who ought to have been a boy instead of him that Sunday of the Easter break ended up being so important that everything was changed as a result. It is absolutely imperative that you take this information into consideration. There is no possible way to exaggerate how important it is. At the same time that my mother did, I made the decision to wear the yellow suit that she had picked out for me. I was 9 years old at the time. All of the aunts and cousins were in attendance, along with the rest of the family. Every single individual I came into contact with made a statement on the fact that I had increased in height since the last time we had seen one another. The bulk of the other individuals who were discussing the same subject as Tony were in total agreement with each other, yet Tony had differing opinions from all of them. I noticed that he was holding his can of soda with such intensity that the knuckles of his hands had turned completely white. The look that appeared on his face at the same moment that he suddenly became exceedingly angry made it easy for everyone who was in attendance to recognize it without delay. All of the individuals who were involved in the matter were kept up to date with every particular. He stuck his arm out, which prevented me from going outside to the garden, where there were more people cooking. Can a person really have the belief that they are more appealing in terms of their physical appearance than they actually are? When you think about this, is making other people happy the only concern that comes to mind, or is there another aspect that may be involved in this? Have you not yet abandoned your aspirations to become the kind of someone who possesses the ability to command the attention of other people? The type of attention to which individuals were referring in the situations that were occurring was unknown to me at the time. You made your appearance at the very same moment that I was peacefully enjoying my dessert in the corner of the room. Tony was never pleased with anything because there was no problem that he was unable to overcome. In every respect and at all times, I am yours entirely. You have complete possession over me. Once I start receiving messages from you, Will it be possible for you to comprehend what I'm trying to say? I had a great deal of difficulty communicating this to you, which is why I had such a tough time finding the perfect language to describe it to you. I concluded the letter with the following statement. I really wanted to make sure that you knew that you were mine and mine alone. I was acting in accordance with my belief that there was no strategy in place to address the problem at the time. That is why I did not want you to give anyone else the time of day. Is it reasonable or practical to assert that brothers are the proprietors of their sisters? Is there any conceivable scenario in which someone might view this proposition as being at all reasonable? They are not, are they? By the time that particular day arrived, they had already changed their outlook on the world. I was able to understand from the expression in his eyes that he was angry, and that he had the want to take something for himself. I was deeply emotionally invested in the feeling. I made an effort to exchange words with my mother. Tony has been acting really strangely around me, I muttered over and over again, shaking my voice. Following that, she used a dish towel to dry her hands. Following that, she turned her body around in such a way that she was now facing the same direction that I was standing in. For a short length of time, she made an effort to maintain her posture without moving. She kept her body still in order to remain in the exact same position and stance that she had been in before that time. The behaviors that she exhibited after being confronted with the reality gave the impression that she did not possess the ability to comprehend things in the same manner that other people did. Sweetheart, she whispered in a gentle voice as she drew closer to me, your brother only wishes to protect you. The emotions he has for you are real. They are profound and authentic. Nevertheless, I could see by the expression in her eyes that she was already cognizant of this truth and that she was frightened to mention it again. I was the only person in attendance at that specific place and time. I was the sole individual that was there at that exact moment. They were speaking in a place where there were no other people nearby. During the time when the events that would transpire at that location were taking place, my father was not in attendance at the residence. At that point in time, I was considered to be under his legal care. He did not possess any awareness of the situation that had developed in our household because he was uninformed of the events that were unfolding within the house. He does not appear to have obtained this information by any means that we can think of. I do not know where your mother is. She may be anywhere for all I know. Is that a question you have asked your father in the past? When her defense was actually needed, I did not have the fortitude to come to her aid. People enjoy spending time with my brother since everyone adores him. Everyone adores him. It is an indisputable fact. Everyone likes to spend time with him because he is a fun companion. In addition, he made me feel like I was worthless. I have never received aid from anyone in situations like this before. This should give the entire country an unfavorable opinion of this. I had learned to forget about everyone else, and in the process, I had become a person who everyone else had forgotten about. As a consequence of this, I was able to maintain my normal schedule and avoid leaving any sign that the events that were unfolding in my immediate vicinity were actually taking place. I have come to the conclusion that it is absolutely essential for me to maintain silence regarding the findings of my investigation. Despite the fact that I was unable to choose from all of the other options that would have been open to me, there is a possibility that I may have selected other possibilities. Following that, I learned how to contain my sentiments and emotions and to avoid displaying them to other individuals. My father was a staunch advocate for techniques that combined strict discipline with love that is without conditions or limits. My father was unwavering in his belief that the utilization of language that was harsh and unyielding was the most efficacious approach to imparting knowledge to others. As soon as Tony started to act in a way that was considered to be immoral, the opinion that my father had of him began to become increasingly unfavorable. He began to think of him as a son who was making a genuine effort to develop and reach maturity as a man. The whole notion that his daughter, who has provided him so much happiness and is completely devoid of guilt, could be the one responsible for doing such atrocious things against his own sister is something that he would have never considered possible. The idea that it may possibly happen did not even cross his mind because it seemed so unlikely. My father has never been someone who values or acknowledges the significance of my emotions in the past. This is a reality that is indisputable, regardless of anyone's personal beliefs or opinions. In the long run, The choice that the young woman made ultimately resulted in dire straits for her. The individual whose measurements were continuously utilized as the foundation for making decisions regarding his status. The evenings that I remember the most are those on which Tony came to see me in my room, even if I can remember a large number of evenings in general. This is the most unforgettable evening that I can recall. An unbroken cycle was still in a state of flux. It was still going through the same sequence of events that would continue to occur again and again, without interruption. When I was a child, it was common for my father to stop by my room. He would perch himself on the edge of my bed, run his fingers through my hair, and profess that I was the most beautiful girl in the entire family. His voice was pleasant and even somewhat reassuring, yet his statements nevertheless had a clearly perceptible edge, despite this fact. It was the practice that had been utilized in the past, and as a result, the decision was made to continue with the current state of affairs. It was being deceptive about the malicious intentions that it was hiding just beneath the surface that made it a monster. That was what the reasoning had led to. To start things off, I feigned that I was completely clueless about what was going on. I closed my eyes and hoped that he would leave me in peace. He behaved in a way that was uncharacteristic of him this time around. He would run his fingers through my hair, tell me how beautiful I am, and let me know how often he thinks about me. He would make sure that none of us were ever separated by a distance more than the length of an arm. Every time he would approach me, I would feel like I was on the verge of vomiting. I would also get an intense sense of anxiousness that would saturate my very bones. These are the recollections that instantly come to mind the instant that I start to reflect upon them at a speed that is fast enough. When you take into consideration all of the many facets of this problem, which aspect of it bothers you the most? Every time my father would walk into the room, I would feel feelings that I had never felt before, particularly when he would praise Tony and refer to him as the best son in the world, as well as the very definition of what it meant to be a man. Tony puffed out his chest and broke out into a smile. I would continue to be in the same position if I continued to be in that position for a long amount of time. Furthermore, I would feel as though I were invisible, and I would believe that whatever I contributed to the discussion was pointless. The likelihood that the issues had not been adequately resolved at the exact point in time at which the proclamation of this nature was released can be irrefutably proved. I was sitting down one evening at the age of 11, when everything in my life was changed in an instant. Because of this, the manner in which the game is played has been subject to a substantial modification. In order to commemorate my birthday, my mother cooked a miniature cake for me. Out of all of the different variants of this dish, the one that I remember the best is the one that is prepared with strawberry jam and cornmeal. Making a decision is challenging because there are so many different ways to prepare this dish. Two were connected to one another by the same technique. The people that were with them did not give them any gifts, and there were no major get-togethers to celebrate the event. There were only 4 of us who ended up at that location in the long run: Tony, my mother, my father, and I. Tony eventually reached the point where he could no longer contain his impatience. This happened much later on in the day. Nonetheless, it was still the same evening. This came as such a complete surprise to me that I was utterly thrown off guard. I have no desire to accomplish anything, as I do not have knowledge on the motivation behind the shift in circumstances. Was his apprehension that being associated with my family would compromise his position of power, or was he worried that my senior age would be a problem? The findings revealed that the necklace was produced using a material of inferior quality, and that it is in reality constituted of plastic, which was determined not long ago. Not only did he manage to achieve that, he also made a significant to-do over the official gift of the item to me. Throughout the time that his performance lasted, he acted as though the object in question was the most important thing in the entire world. He kept me embraced in his arms for a lengthier period of time than what would be deemed the bare minimum of good behavior for a significant stretch of time. The content filters prohibited the generated text. I turned my head so that I could have a look at my mother. It was of enormous importance to me to have her present in order to fully understand what was going on and see the events as they developed. She never did anything like that under any circumstances, and there was never a moment in which it did not occur. She turned her head in the opposite direction, as if she was hesitant to acknowledge its presence in any way, or to even take a glance at it. In order to get rid of it, she was required to remove it from that specific location, which was something that she did not have the ability to do. In the end, her greatest defeat was brought about by the overpowering force, and the feeling of alarm and fear arose to take complete control. Ever since that time, it has become a regular occurrence for Tony to come by and pay a visit to us. In order to ensure that I was being watched at all times, he would visit my room after nightfall and remain there for a significant amount of time. Whenever he would say things such as, "I am your brother. There is nothing you would ever have to be ashamed of saying in my presence," my heart would begin to race and my body would become rigid. However, I was unable to shout. It would seem that the words possessed the capability to traverse the atmosphere that encompassed them and to persist in the guise of a noxious miasma. When I was in periods like this, I would remind myself, "Your health is something that you are responsible for." I did not have the desire to endure these particular times. Because I seemed to be asleep, it would be simple to draw the conclusion that everything was going according to plan and that there were no problems present. Nonetheless, this would be inaccurate because the truth of the situation was that everything was playing out exactly as it was playing out at that very moment. There is no question that this is the proper answer. It was something that happened every night, and the feelings that it brought about seemed to be significantly stronger than the ones from the night before. As soon as I would get out of bed every morning, my body would start to shake. I was unable to stop shaking due to the panic episodes that I was having. Even if I were ever to find myself in that same circumstance again, I would still be able to taste fear at the back of my mouth. This mental state progressively evolved over an extended period of time, and it was marked by an increasing sense of hopelessness. As soon as Tony made his entrance into the bathroom, he started to make a big fuss while I was in the shower. When he said that he had forgotten his towel because he had misplaced it, I was clear that he was not being honest with me. This snapshot is an accurate representation of the situation that is now taking place. Whenever I was in severe need of assistance and support, neither of which ended up being provided by him. The main justification for his presence was that he was there for the purpose of observation, to compel me to feel that I am not valuable to him in any manner, and that I am simply another thing or another piece of property that he would like to take possession of as his own. When faced with the circumstance, I did not know how to respond because it did not feel like I was capable of handling it. When the time came for it to happen, I was unsure of what the most effective approach would be to deal with the situation. He would break into hysterical spasms of laughter right in front of me whenever I attempted to make a request for him to give me a break and fight back. Every time he would repeat the words, "You are my sister," it felt as though I was stuck in a nightmare that was really horrifying. I had no choice but to accept the repercussions of whatever it was that I did. Someone who was using sign language communicated to him that his supply of alternatives had been exhausted. This incredibly horrible incident is something that no one could ever conceive doing in real life since it would be too terrifying for anyone to endure. She made certain to constantly check in on Tony and to monitor him closely, particularly throughout the middle of the night. She did not have any intention of taking any effort to make any improvements to the situation, despite the fact that she constantly indicated to him that she was uncomfortable with the amount of time that he spent in my bed. She made a conscious decision to refrain from inquiring about the cause for his presence, and to refrain from asking him to take his leave. The way in which she dealt with the circumstances made it abundantly apparent that this was a problem that had arisen on many occasions in the past. Furthermore, despite the fact that it was a nuisance, I ought to be able to handle it. I was cognizant of the fact that my mother's knowledge of the problems that were unfolding in the midst of the catastrophe grew with each new event that transpired during the crisis. She is extremely skilled in the subject that is now being discussed, and she has a great deal of knowledge about it. Just by taking a brief glance into her eyes, I was able to determine that she was going through a combination of emotions, such as sorrow and apprehension. She was fully aware of the circumstances, including the fact that Tony was causing me a great deal of difficulties. However, despite this, she did not have the self-confidence that was necessary in order for her to figure out how she might possibly overcome the difficulties that were in her way. She found out that there was nothing that she could do to stop it from taking place. Nothing that I communicated to him was something that he believed in. If I were to tell him anything, I would be lying to him. If by some chance I were to come into his presence, he would be reluctant to offer me any type of justification beyond his repeated claim that I was making up the events that had taken place. Every time Tony found himself in a challenging situation, he would invariably figure out a method to offer assistance and support, which served as proof of the extent to which he cared about him. There are some elements that will not be taken into consideration while looking at the problem that is being investigated at the moment. This was just one of the various distinct things that occurred, and there were a large number of additional things that went place concurrently with it. Everything that was necessary was already included in the box. There was nothing lacking. Just because I was a woman, they would spread malicious rumors about me and giggle behind my back. They would make comments such as, "If only you were a boy, then you would actually be worth something." The reality is that my physique was much different from that of a man. I really did not know what else to do, so I decided to continue being the person who had the name Jessica. The mistake. The individual who failed to meet the requirements when I was 13 years old. I was fully cognizant for the first time in my life that I had reached a point of no return. I had come to a point in my decision-making process when I could go no further. There was no going back. We came together that evening at the dining table to partake in a simple supper. That evening would later be given the name Christmas Eve. The simple supper was something that both of us discovered to be delicious. Mashed potatoes are a universally adored dish, and the ones that my mother produced are particularly famous in this region. She is the one who made them. My father, on the other hand, was providing me with a detailed account of the day that he had spent working at his place of job. It seemed as though everything was turning out just as it was expected to. On the other hand, Tony did not say a single word throughout the duration of the entire event. He remained silent. The silence is so terrible that it makes it difficult to think of a figure that would adequately reflect its real extent, given how smothering it is. He never took his eyes off of me for the whole of the time that he was on the opposite side of the room, and he also did not make any interruptions in our eye contact as he was crossing the room. It seemed as if he was looking forward to something with great anticipation and eagerness. I was very aware of the fact that his gaze was directed at me. Furthermore, I noticed a tremendous amount of pressure on my chest, which made it difficult for me to take deep breaths. While the other individuals were distracted with topics that were not linked to the topic that was being addressed, he brought me to the side. People were under the impression that something awful would happen every time he opened his mouth, since his voice has a deep, rich timbre. "I know you think you're the only person in the world like you. You're not. You're mine, and you don't belong to anyone else. You need to remember this." I was at a complete loss as to what options were available to me when I found myself in such a troubling circumstance, and because of this, I was unable to determine what it was that I should do. It dawned on me that I was stuck within a house with 4 walls and that there was no possible way for me to escape it. I did not have any individuals approach me with a need for assistance during the time that I was working on my assignment. My mother never had a problem with anything I did, but my father was suspicious of anything that I said. He did not trust a single thing that came out of my mouth. The most effective form of retribution is to remain silent and not react if someone does something that you perceive as wrong. I have reached the same conclusion. I remained silent, which led everyone to believe that everything was going according to plan, but the truth of the matter is that I was terrified and suffering on the inside. Every night, I would lie in bed and wait for the sound of Tony's footsteps as he drew near to my home. It would feel as though I were his personal possession. I would see him and sense his breath on me as he hovered over me. Every time without fail, I would pray and hope that everything would proceed without any hitches and that nothing would be forgotten. All of the endeavors proved to be futile. There was never any manner, any form, or any way in which the object could possibly come into existence. I had the belief that my mother would ultimately be the one to speak up and support me, due to the fact that it was grounded on reality. Moreover, I had pinned all of my hopes on the idea that Tony would be the one to put a stop to the bullying that I was dealing with. Regardless of this, none of these desires were ever realized, at any point in time or in any fashion. The 2 goals that I had set for myself in the future were, in my opinion, Nothing more than terrible pranks played on me by other people. Each day was an exact copy of the day that had come before it and the day that would come after it. For a few minutes, I yearned to escape to a place where I could be at peace and quiet. My mother would take her normal afternoon naps, and my father would go to the pub to spend time with his friends. Whenever Tony went out with his teammates, I experienced a feeling of contentment. At that point in time, I was able to inhale a long, deep breath. Inside the limits of the residence, there was a strong feeling that appeared to saturate the atmosphere, a heavy sense of suffocation. The environment was so peculiar that it gave the impression that the air was too noxious to be inhaled into the lungs. The sheer degree to which the terror had saturated the entire place was utterly shocking to me. It had infiltrated every room, every corner, and every area. I was taken away by it because Tony had such a tremendous impact on the people and things that were around him. It seemed as though the walls were gradually becoming closer and closer with each passing second, as if they were moving at a constant velocity. I arrived at the decision that I would have to persuade myself that things would work out all right in the end, and that I would be able to remove myself from the predicament that I was in at that time. In spite of the fact that I did not maintain full awareness of it, I was still alert on some level that it was not going to go away. Tony made it a habit to visit the trips on a regular basis. He also made participation more challenging for them by increasing the quantity of physical training that they were obligated to complete. He would wait until it was time for him to go to bed, which would be a long time after the other folks had retired to their rooms for the night. He would continue to remain in the same location till such a time as it did occur. He would wait for the sun to drop before going back to his room. At first, he only allowed us to sit next to each other and watch what it was that I was working on. He started to make physical contact with me after a certain period of time had elapsed. He did not make any effort to become better acquainted with me in the course of the first few contacts that we had with each other. He rubbed his hands over every inch of my body, making sure he didn't miss a single spot. More than a single time, his stare tarried on my legs, breast, and back. There were no exceptions to the pattern of nights that had before them. Every single one of them was an identical replica of the nights that had come before. Despite the fact that I was in a significant amount of agony and unable of moving my body, I would continue to hold the position that I had already taken. I chose to keep my mouth shut at that specific juncture in time. I kept my thoughts and opinions to myself. My lips were so tightly constricted that they were even tauter than the hide of a drum. If I ever found myself in a situation like the one that is currently playing out, I would fake sleep and act as though none of it were taking place. Regardless of this, I would come to the conclusion that the implementation of this methodology would not result in any kind of output that is satisfactory. There is no conceivable way that it could have been anything other than the real product. It was indubitably the genuine article. I learned from that terrible disaster that there was no way to avoid it. I would have to face it head-on and deal with it. I was 14 years old when I went through an experience one evening that left an emotional scar that has remained with me all these years and is not likely to go away anytime soon. Even if I lived for 1 billion years, this is something that I would never be able to forget. I was in the middle of the room, and I was trying to muster the courage to leave the place. I came to the realization that my legs would not move because I was absolutely terrified. He kept walking, and the sound of his shoes reverberated across the corridor that stretched out behind him. The floor was covered with hardwood, which caused each step that he took to echo throughout the room. He was compelled to fight for himself at every stage of the process due to the fact that he spent such a long time trying to accomplish this objective. As soon as I became aware of the idea that I was about to observe something occur, I heard the door begin to make a creaking noise. I felt an intense sensation in my stomach that he was going to make me feel sad again. This time I was not able to keep my feelings under control. I eventually arrived at a point where I was no longer able to convince myself that I have the skills that would be required to emerge triumphant from the struggle that was awaiting me in the future. At long last, I drew the decision that the only thing that I could do in this situation was to hand in my notice of resignation and resign from the job that I held. At that particular point in time, I made no further attempts to present myself as if I were a member of the human species. I was feeling like I needed to let out a loud scream really badly. Going for a run was something that I was very certain I ought to do immediately. I wanted to get some exercise, therefore I had to go outside. I want to underscore the fact that I am not liable for that action in any kind, no matter what other people might have to say on the topic. I stayed in my posture exactly as I was before, not breathing and placing all of my optimism in the notion that he would exit the building. In this situation, he exhibited behavior that was completely uncharacteristic of him. He maintained the identical posture that he had assumed when he first made his entrance into the room and did not change from that position. As for him, it would never be settled down. I got the feeling that he was staring at me in such a way that he thought of me as nothing more than an inconsequential item. He did not utter a single syllable. He maintained his silence for the entire length of time. He did not hold the belief that anything he did that would contribute to the occurrence of this tragedy was his obligation to do. The instant that he entered the room where I was, I could sense my heart beginning to race and the palms of my hands starting to get sweaty. He drew closer to me with his arms extended out in front of him, and his palms were facing me as he drew ever closer. The intense stare that he was giving me made me feel so uncomfortable that I could feel my knees quivering and my whole body shaking. As he was on the edge of reaching his arm out into the immense stretch of air, he had not done anything that might be considered unlawful. It was at that very moment that he was able to distinguish the sound of his father's voice that was coming from the floor below. Everything appeared to have come to a complete and utter standstill for a brief moment in time. Tony decided that it would be better for him to get out of the situation after giving the matter some consideration. Due to the fact that the sounds that were emanating from the back of his lips were the only thing that I could make out, I was unable to distinguish the words that he was trying to say. I was not at all convinced that my own interests would be negatively impacted as a result of this. I lay down and stayed there for a lengthy period of time due to the fact that I was so frightened that I might move or talk. I was completely overcome with such an overwhelming sense of terror that I found myself unable of moving even a single muscle in my entire body. He was thorough to the extreme. He paid particular attention to every detail, and he made sure that nothing was forgotten and that everything was carried out according to the timeline, just as it had been on all of the occasions that had preceded this one. He never took part in the action at any point in time. To contrast this, the perception that he had of himself was an idea that was significantly more advanced and refined. The only element of his self-image that Tony took into consideration when he pondered on his self-perception was the fact that he thought of himself as the ideal son, who possessed all of the attributes of a perfect child. Additionally, he was very convinced that he exhibited every trait that would make him the perfect daughter. It was the son who did not possess the power to commit an action that would be classified as a criminal offense. He was able to sidestep all of the repercussions that were directly linked to the activities that he had performed in the past. He was able to exercise his power in order to carry out any task that he had the desire to do due to the fact that he possessed the right to do so. He had been chosen beforehand to carry on the family line, and his task was to make sure that the family name would continue to be remembered for years to come. I do not have any knowledge of where your mother is. She may be anywhere. Did you perhaps happen to inquire about the question to your father in any way? She never asked Tony any questions. The idea of asking me about the reasons I was not able to get any sleep or what had happened when he came into my room in the middle of the night never even occurred to her. She was not interested in developing any new abilities or learning anything that was new to her. The truth is that she did not have any desire to learn new things. She was overcome by the events that ensued when she was finally able to face the truth of the predicament in which she found herself. I was aware of it, however. I was cognizant of the fact that she was going through the exact same conditions that I was because we were both ensnared in the same web of fear, guilt, and denial that held all of us captive in this cruel and twisted family. On a daily basis, Tony made every effort to engage in a significant number of new activities, and it is through these efforts that he maintained a consistent sense of self-assurance and boldness. He would come into my room every single night. As time passed, the sentiments of repulsion and intrusion that were the result of these meetings only became more intense. They were able to achieve this task because they had made a promise to themselves that they would take action. I gave it everything I had to fight back, and I unleashed as ear-splitting of a scream as I was capable of producing. In spite of this, I am able to say with complete certainty that neither of these two techniques gave rise to even the tiniest idea in my mind that they would result in a beneficial conclusion. Whenever I have ever been presented with the chance to voice my thoughts, he would use all means at his disposal to prevent me from doing so. He was completely uninterested in the method by which he reached at that point. The only thing that mattered to him was the end. It was a non-issue as far as he was concerned whether he laid his hand over my mouth or led me to get distressed by communicating his worry that he would warn my father that I was fabricating stories and that I was raising a ruckus. There were further pieces of information that I was not privy to that ought to have been considered beyond a reasonable doubt as evidence. It left the sense that each and every object had been curved or modified in some way. It gave the impression that it had been twisted, which is why it had such an unusual appearance and texture. It was as like I was imprisoned in a terrifying nightmare, unable to find a way to fully wake up from it. I was continually gripped with a sense of dread and faced with challenges that were exceptionally difficult to surmount. Despite this, I consistently maintained an optimistic outlook on life. After I had taken the choice to quit, I waited for the amount of time that I had set for myself before eventually going through with quitting. One day, when the future has arrived, I will leave this town and this lifestyle, and I will begin a new chapter of my life in a different place. The hopeful viewpoint that had been previously mentioned was beginning to evoke the feeling of remembering an occurrence that had occurred in the distant past. As Tony continued to cause me emotional grief, I became more and more aware of the fact that leaving the region would not be an easy way out of the problem. Exiting the property and commencing the process of packing was a far more challenging endeavor than anyone had expected it would be. I did not have the ability to leave. My mother has never been treated by me with disrespect. It is something that I have never considered doing at any point in my life. I am at a loss to think of a scenario in which I would have the chance to pull off something like that. The notion of deserting her and allowing her to handle matters with my father and Tony without any help from me was something that I vehemently opposed of. I avoided engaging in conversation with either one of the two individuals for the simple reason that I was too frightened to do otherwise. I can provide evidence that I was at that exact area at that precise period in time. I clung to the idea that someone will come to my rescue one day while I was still imprisoned in that room and structure. That location was devoid of any people at that particular moment in time. There was not a single person there. I have developed the skill of giving the appearance that I am not interested in the feelings or problems of other people over the course of many years. I had developed a tremendous ability to emotionally disconnect from myself, completely ignoring the uncomfortable feelings that I was having and pretending that everything was going just fine. I did not strike up any conversations with any strangers, and I also did not become friends with any new people. For the whole time that the event lasted, I was within the facility, and during that period I did not visit any other locations. I waited patiently in my room before I did anything else, hoping that the perfect moment to act would present itself. In comparison to all of the other rooms in the entire house, my room is the only one where I have the feeling that I am completely shielded from any kind of danger that might possibly come my way. I was looking forward to a specific day that I was excited about, so I bided my time for an extended period. After what seemed like a lifetime, I was at long last presented with the chance to make my escape. I was going through a period of intense mental distress at that moment in my life. I was overcome with a broad spectrum of feelings, including but not limited to shame, dread, and guilt. These feelings were so overwhelming that they gave me the idea that I did not have the ability to take even a single breath. It seemed as if I were being overcome by a wave that washed all of my great traits and capabilities away. I was rendered incapable of responding in any kind since I did not have a creative reaction prepared, given the circumstances that had just taken place. I could scarcely earn enough money to meet the most basic requirements of my life. During the time regarding which you are making inquiries, I did not exist yet. Without notice and with great rapidity, a transformation took place. There were no indications that this transformation would occur. There was not a single advance warning provided regarding the transition that was going to take place. One day a change occurred. There were no indicators that this change was about to occur, and no one was given any advance notice that it was going to occur. Everything that took place was completely routine and did not diverge from the sequence of events that normally take place. Therefore, the situation did not change in any kind or form. This circumstance, in contrast, was different from that because it was a simple event that happened on a regular basis. In addition, it did not resemble the large-scale rescue operations that are highlighted in a considerable number of films that feature large-scale rescue operations in the slightest. The transition was made in such a way that it was hard to distinguish what was going on, which was caused by the fact that it was so fluid. When it initially became obvious to the rest of the world, it was nothing more than a feeling. The people were undergoing emotions that were not only different but also strange, and at that moment in history, there was no vocabulary that could adequately convey the range of feelings that they were experiencing. But as time went on, I slowly came to the realization that it was a feeling that I had never felt before. Rage. The predominant feelings of moral indignation were in accordance with those emotions and provided the foundation for the ethical norms that followed them. I am of the opinion that I have finally arrived at a stage in my life when I have the ability to express the aspect of my personality that I have been hiding due to my feelings of humiliation, fear, and immobility. I have arrived at the exact same conclusion that you have arrived at regarding the topic that is currently being addressed. After what felt like a lifetime, I finally overcame this obstacle and escaped this terrible environment for the first time. I responded to this by maintaining a positive and optimistic outlook. I continued to have a positive mindset about my capacity to perform this job properly, despite the fact that the situation was challenging. The year was 1965. I was 14 years old when I found myself in the same predicament that my mother had been in when she was 14 years old. I experienced my mother as the mother that I know her to be in the present for the very first time at that very same moment. The conclusion that I reached was that an internal revolution had taken place within my own body. Over the course of time, I have learned how to withhold facts from other people and how to be dishonest. After some time had passed, I gradually came to the conclusion that if I continued to conceal myself behind a veil of secrecy, I would be unable to continue to satisfy the duties that I had on a daily basis. I had come to the decision that I would keep permitting my father and Tony to take care of every element of my life without setting any limitations on the activities that they were permitted to carry out. Lately, I have been paying more attention to the little things in life that I used to ignore. My mother seemed to diminish little over time. She did not discipline Tony for his misdeeds, and she would not let me speak even when I felt something was wrong. These are the recollections that I have of my mother. I have reached the conclusion that my mother is not only my mother, she is also a person who has her own sense of identity. She had never been afforded the opportunity to develop her strength, and she was a woman who was weak and injured in ways that were difficult to understand. The way in which she was raised instilled in her the conviction that her self-worth and value sprang from her capacity to serve others and to reduce her own importance in order to provide assistance to the folks who were closest to her. Taking everything into consideration, how does that relate to me in the circumstances that I am currently in? What goals have we set for ourselves in comparison to the young woman who was obligated to see this catastrophe? Then, she was left to confront the reality that she would have to mature at a rate that was beyond anyone's capacity to cope. I found myself staring into the mirror one afternoon after my father had gone to the pub and Tony had gone to meet up with his mates. Following the passage of a substantial period of time, I approached the mirror to have a look at my reflection and remained there for an extended period of time. This was the first time I had ever done something like that because I had never done anything like that before in my life. I had the acquaintance of a young woman who had been completely incapacitated by the events that had occurred in her life. Someone had informed her that she did not have the autonomy to make any decisions about her own body. She had been robbed of her vitality as a result of the grief and the stillness that had befallen her. Her power had diminished to a level that was nothing near as great as it had been in years prior. I am also able to bear testimony to another occasion in which an individual was able to emerge successful after overcoming a significant amount of barriers. I saw firsthand the anguish and distress that had been visited upon the individual in question. It took a tremendous amount of fortitude to put that memory behind me. Additionally, I reached a decision concerning the activities in which I would take part during that particular time frame. There were no situations whatsoever in which I intended to act in that manner. In this circumstance, I was not going to let them emerge victorious. I would never do anything to accommodate Tony. At no point in time can I think of when I would have let him have the upper hand over me. In no situation would I ever do anything that could place my father in a position where he would possibly have the ability to inflict me damage. The problem that I was in had taken all of my attention because I was trying to come up with a solution to get out of it. I was ready to take any and all measures that were required to get out of that place, even if that meant that I would need to carry out the actions that I had intended to do without any help from anyone else. The days that followed were filled with a continuous feeling of peace, which was noticeable to the people in the world that surrounded them. The quiet was a major deviation from the standard because it was in stark contrast to the commotion that had been present before. My ideas are my own, and no one else can have any awareness of the things that are going through my mind. I did not have the ability to accomplish that. Who is able to provide assistance and listen to me when I am in need of discussing the challenges that I am facing? Who else might be affected by this? On a subconscious level, I knew that I had an obligation to abide by certain commitments, no matter what else was going on at the time. I began to save money and started saving away every single penny that I could find in order to preserve it in a safe place. I started to prepare and sell meals to the individuals that reside in my vicinity without letting my parents know about what I was doing. This accomplishment is the first instance in the history of humanity that someone has achieved a feat of this precise kind. Throughout the all of human history, there is not a single documented case that proves that an individual has been able to effectively finish a piece of work of this kind. Furthermore, the first action was implemented with the purpose of making further progress toward the accomplishment of the goal that had been decided upon in advance. The total sum of money that was gathered was nothing close to reaching the threshold that would be necessary in order to be considered meaningful in any way, shape, or form. It was my belief that the only course of action was to make your escape from that place as rapidly as possible and leave the area behind. In order to get myself out of that situation, I had to come up with a plan of action. I was cognizant of the fact that I was in a perilous situation, but I was doing everything within my power to handle it. I was cognizant of the fact that my father and Tony would not think twice about holding me accountable for the criminal actions that I was carrying out in the event that they were to find out about them. I had reached a stage in my life where I was certain that there were no activities that I was truly passionate about. That being said, I was often worried and stressed out, which made it impossible for me to find pleasure in the things that I thought were good in life. This piece of news has left me in a state of great distress. I was pretending that everything was going well when it was evident that it was not, and this pretense was causing me to become increasingly fatigued. Being physically confined within a place that strongly resembles a prison is an immensely uncomfortable feeling, as I can attest from my own personal experience. In addition, there is no doubt that the quantity of oxygen that I was breathing in was steadily being reduced. The more time that went, the more self-confidence I developed in myself. The moment that the sun started to descend below the horizon, I would collect my luggage and leave my home. I would soon come to know a small circle of individuals at that area who would be willing to aid me whenever I needed it. The passing of my mother was followed by a series of frequent visits from a group of senior-aged women from the church. They would come by to see how I was doing. In addition to that, they included the neighbor who had occasionally brought me additional food because they had seen the significant amount of weight that I had lost. They had enough information to realize that I was in desperate need of help, even if they did not fully comprehend the topic that was being discussed. It is only now that I have come to the idea that making a request for something should not be an arduous task. As an example, I previously believed that it was vital for me to have someone in my life who would listen to me, acknowledge that I existed, and have faith in me. The idea that any of these traits were embarrassing to talk about or to admit that I possessed did not occur to me. I was cognizant of this fact because there was not a single method that I could employ on my own in order to accomplish this goal. At the same time, I was working on learning to trust other people, treating them like friends, and taking the first steps toward independence. The time that I had been looking forward to finally arrived after a long period of anticipation. Something that I could never have predicted happened one night, at the exact moment that I was about to give up completely on all of my dreams and ambitions. It would seem as though there is a complete absence of any evidence to suggest that it has existed at any point in time in the past. It gives the impression that it merely appeared out of nowhere all of a sudden. When my father came home late in the evening, it was very similar to many other times in the past. It was the consumption of the alcoholic drink that caused him to become inebriated. The moment that he arrived, he started to shout at her without first giving my mother any notice. The generated text has been blocked by our content filters. This time, I held myself fully still, maintaining the posture of a statue with my body absolutely immobile. This is an odd situation for me, as I have observed it happen so many times before. This time, I deliberately took the decision to leave my room and avoid going back in order to separate myself from the rest of the world. As I made my way into the kitchen, I did my best to move around as discreetly as possible. Once I was there, I started filling my bags with as much money and food as I was physically able to carry. I left that place as soon as I could without causing any problems due to the fact that the amount of money that I had on hand was just enough to allow me to make my escape. I was not cognizant of the path that I was traveling since I lacked any understanding of the location to which it would take me, despite the fact that I was cognizant of this particular reality. I felt a powerful feeling that I needed to leave that location as rapidly as possible. I did not want to remain in that area any longer, and I had a strong desire to get out of there as quickly as possible. As soon as I crossed the threshold of the door and entered the chamber, I was enveloped in a burst of energy. I have a memory of feeling exactly the same way the first time that I took a breath of oxygen. The instant that I returned to the correct path, I felt as though the weight that had been crushing my chest had been lifted from me. This specific mindset is no longer widespread in the present day, which can be demonstrated by taking into consideration this particular mode of thinking. I noticed that there was someone following in my footsteps while I was walking down the road. I have a substantial amount of knowledge about the feelings that are associated with the experience of being on the verge of passing out. I had a strong feeling of terror in my gut, and as soon as I felt it, I turned around and went to have a closer look at the situation. The job was finished by Tony. He seemed to possess knowledge of all the things that I was doing when he looked at me in that manner. The moment that our eyes locked, I was instantly engulfed by a powerful sense of dread due to the cold and critical look that he gave me. I had that feeling because I was doing things that he might possibly try to stop me from doing. I was once again giving consideration to the substance of the preceding sentence that I had jotted down. At that very moment, he started to break into a smile. His lopsided grin was far from nice to look at. No matter what the situation was, this made him look as though something was wrong with his health. I was so frightened by the event that I witnessed that I could feel a bone-chilling tremor begin at the back of my neck, and then make its way all the way down to my toes. If I were to make an appearance without giving you any form of advanced warning or explanation for why I was there, would it be considered unusual or absurd? He put forward a terrifying question in a voice that was quiet. I made the decision to reject it because I did not feel as though I had a responsibility to acknowledge it in any way. I carried on my quest to find the object that I had been seeking ever since I started my journey in the other direction of the route that I had previously walked. Despite the fact that his gaze stayed fixed on me and his posture did not change, he did not follow me into the darkness. This is despite the fact that I started moving again. After the time limit that had been assigned to him had already elapsed, he continued to be adamant about avoiding making eye contact with me. As a consequence of this, I was never able to spend time with him again in my life. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending us super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.